Hello. This video is going to be relatively simple editing-wise, and I'm not going to put in much effort to make it flashy. I just want to get my ideas out there and see what everyone else thinks. I'm also using the Microsoft David/Toby Fox text-to-speech software, like a worse version of Half-Bred Chaos. Unlike Half-Bred Chaos, I don't know how to correct mispronunciations, so I apologize for those. With that said, this video contains spoilers up to and including Deltarune Chapter 5. You can discuss the video in the comments, but remember to be kind. Please enjoy. Before I can tell you my ideas, I need to talk to you about death. Specifically, how monsters die in Deltarune. It's more difficult to parse than one may expect. In Undertale, monsters turn to dust upon their deaths. One would assume this would be the same in Deltarune, but this might be wrong. There is a graveyard is hometown. This is something that was never seen nor even mentioned in Undertale. It makes sense. A graveyard implies bodies. Why would a monster have a headstone if there was nothing to mark? And yet, hometown has a graveyard. In Chapter 5, Ascari expresses his desire to parade the knight's body around town. A body implies both that they would be dead and that they would not dust. Human exclusive traits are usually discussed with great care and delicateness, but Ascari is very brash and confident in his statement. Also, if bodies were human exclusive and there is only one human in hometown, why does Ascari say he still doesn't know who is making the fountains? However, the only corpse we see, Jerson Boom, is in a glass jar/urn and described as dust rather than ashes. I bring this up as evidence for my belief that monsters do not dust when they die in Deltarune. If you choose to believe this, this is also a very clear example of Deltarune not following Undertale's rules. Jerson Boom's current state seems to be an exception rather than a rule. This belief is important as it could impact my main hypothesis, and I want everyone to be on the same page as me before we jump off the deep end. I will have more of a rant about Jerson Boom's grave specifically linked in the description if you would like to see that. Somehow, likely through the event Ascari keeps mentioning, I think KRIS's original soul ended up inside Dess's body. Simultaneously, Dess's soul was kicked out of her body, only to end up lost in the code. The night is this amalgamation of KRIS's soul and Dess's body. It's a leap, but we can perhaps extend the previous section's logic, that Deltarune does not have to follow Undertale's rules, to suggest that monster souls do not shatter when removed from their body, or that the code has a preserving quality. Believing that monsters do not dust after they die also explains why Dess's body could exist without her original soul. We have never seen a monster with only a human soul, or ever seen humans swap souls, if you are a human Dess believer, but I don't think this is the biggest problem we face with this theory. My current biggest problem is convincing you of this. It has already been well established both that KRIS and the Knight have many similar mannerisms and that the Knight shares similarities to what we know about Dess. If the Knight was a fusion of parts of KRIS and Dess, that would explain why it mimics both. I like the idea that the soul controls its behaviors and the body controls the appearance and magic, hence why the mimicked features are split that way. Chapter 5 introduces us to Aqua, who I find very, very interesting. She seems to be based on a young KRIS and represents the patient's soul from Undertale. She carries a knife, is very mischievous and playful, and mimics KRIS to try and understand what it means to be human. These parallels, plus Aqua being the only flower to contain more than one color, those being cyan and red, have led many to speculate, myself included, that KRIS originally had a cyan soul. The Knight having KRIS's original cyan soul would explain where it went. Besides, the Knight is shown to be incredibly patient. It's been doing this for years. One problem, however. If KRIS's soul is gone, then what's the thing we're controlling? I propose that the soul KRIS currently has is fake in the way an artificial/mechanical heart would be for a human in this world. It was built, likely by a doctor or scientist, could be Gaster, but doesn't have to be, to replace KRIS's original soul. Artificial or mechanical hearts are a real-world invention meant to keep someone alive until they can have a heart transplant. They aren't a permanent solution, but if the technology were to advance enough, they could one day replace the need for heart transplants altogether. This is extremely similar to what I am suggesting, but with an artificial soul instead of a heart. This could explain a couple of things. First, red is the color of determination in Undertale. However, in Deltarune, all Lightners possess the power of determination, making it less of a distinctive trait. The soul could be red because it's seen as a default color. It is the default battle mode, and the fact that the soul can change color at all gives credence to this theory, I feel. Second, and arguably the reason I came up with this theory, is our control over this artificial soul. KRIS clearly had this soul for years before we came along, and it worked well for them. We have been with KRIS for less than a week out of their entire lifespan, which makes me think that we are not the soul. Rather, we simply control the soul through the device. Side note, if you do not know at least the premise of device theory, I would advise you to look it up now. No, the full 10 hours are not necessary, but it is an excellent watch if you have the time. I have seen the theory that we are a demon summoned by Caddy and KRIS when they were younger pop up from time to time. This was compelling in the Chapter 2 era, but given that it was never mentioned again as far as I know and the gobs upon gobs of evidence supporting device theory added in chapters 3, 4, and 5, I don't think this is true. Rather I propose a similar but different idea, the Goner Maker voice, who is most certainly Gaster, hacked into KRIS's artificial soul and gave US control of them by proxy. I am aware that Gaster gave US control of KRIS seemingly by accident, which could dismantle this theory entirely. He seemed genuine in wanting to create US an ideal body, but was then interrupted by a mysterious voice before we wake up as KRIS. It could have been intentional on KRIS's part, in which they willingly let their soul be hacked to find Dess or try and get their original soul back. It could be why they're cooperating with Carol and the Knight. Perhaps opening the shelter would lead to one or neither of those things happening, which is why KRIS is trying to keep US and Susie away from the shelter codes. Maybe this is why Carol is using KRIS specifically, because they alone have this ability due to their artificial soul. If this dissuades you from the theory, I understand. This video isn't to convince anyone that I have solved Deltarune and have ripped the answers from Toby Fox's mind. I simply wanted to present my ideas to the wider Deltarune community and see what people thought. It got me to practice some skills I haven't used in a while as well. Thank you for listening to my ideas. I hope you enjoyed and have an excellent rest of your week. Bye for now.